Well, everyone, this is such a beautiful sight in my opinion. I mean, this thing looks so beautiful right in front of me. Basically, I have all of the, I guess, more recent Samsung Galaxies that have came out from the S lineup. We have the Galaxy S9, S10, S20, S21, and S22. And I was going to throw the Galaxy S8 in here, but I really don't think that's probably going to fit. I did the same video last year as well, but I just love seeing the transition that we've seen from both of these phones. Now, I've already single-handedly compared each single Galaxy to each other by now, so the S10 versus the S21, S22 versus all these other ones. But look at the transition. So with the Galaxy S9, I mean, we had a pretty good display. I mean, this thing was really good when it first came out. It's definitely not the craziest looking thing anymore, but when we went from the Galaxy S9 to the Galaxy S10, this thing was a crazy big difference. The fact that this thing looks as great as it does, I mean, the transition from the S9 to the S10 was beautiful. The same thing with the Galaxy S20. This is the first time we got a 120 Hz display, and this was also a pretty big difference. You know, I'm glad that they kind of shrunk down the bezels a little bit more. They centered that hole punch display, but that 120 Hz at 1440p was amazing, and it still looks very good. Now, with something like the Galaxy S21, you can kind of tell that this is when Samsung kind of switching up a little bit. And the S21's panel I think is good, but it's definitely a downgrade I think from the S20 in general. And that's when things started switching up. But then with the Galaxy S22 that we have now, Samsung has kind of done a better job. They kind of improved the build quality. They put the frosted glass back on, but I think the display looks a little bit better, and I think they shrunk down a little bit of the bezels on the side too. So I think that's a pretty big thing to keep in mind. Now, when I go ahead and compare the design from 2017 or 2018 phone that was stemmed from the 2017 phone, you can kind of see that there's definitely some similarities, but there's mostly differences. You know, look at the differences of the design and everything. I mean, the Galaxy S9 still looked great. It had that, AMOLED display at the time, but there's definitely a lot of advantages for moving up now. They definitely kind of improved the build quality for sure. You can also see the thinness and thickness kind of change between them too. I mean, this definitely looks a lot better and thinner on the Galaxy S9, but a thicker phone brings some capability too. They still have USB Type-C ports on the bottom with Samsung DeX, which is amazing. We did have the headphone jack on the Galaxy S9 and the microSD card slot, but they did remove it a couple generations ago. But definitely the Galaxy S22 looks amazing. And then with the Samsung Galaxy S10, this is where things started changing up like crazy. Samsung did an amazing job with the Samsung Galaxy S10, and as I look at both of these phones right now, I really don't think the Galaxy S22's panel is that much better. We're lacking 120 Hz, so things don't look as smooth, but I would still say the Galaxy S10 panel is still probably better visually than the Galaxy S22's. I also think the viewing angles looks great, but also look at the curved edge on the Galaxy S10. I love that. And I wish it wasn't as crazy of a curve as it was. If it was if it was a little bit less slight, kind of like the Galaxy S20s, I feel like it would be a little bit more popular. But the hole punch display was brought with this phone, and the Galaxy S22 ran with it, and it definitely makes it look a little bit better. The S22 feels like a heavier phone as well, so that's one thing to keep in mind. The Galaxy S10 was also a thin phone. I mean, this thing was a very thin device, and it looks so beautiful. But also, this is the first time we got a triple camera setup on the back of the Galaxy S10, and this one definitely looked a lot better than a lot of other phones. I mean, this camera still completely holds up. 4K at 60 on the back and the front. We do have 8K capability now, and the Galaxy S22's camera is definitely better. But when you look at pretty much the landscape of all these phones, Samsung did a tremendous job with the Galaxy S10, and the design is still kind of similar, not extremely similar, but with the centered hole punch display, beautiful display and everything. You can really see how Samsung took a lot of the S10 and ran with it for sure. Now next up we have the Samsung Galaxy S20, which I think was the best or one of the best looking Samsung phones from the front. However, the back really was kind of a mess, and I'll show you guys in a second if you haven't seen it, but the design on the front looks the same. You still have that curved glass on the Galaxy S20. Now we have that flat sides, which looks fine. Hole punch display originated in the center of the Galaxy S20, which was really cool. Got a random update here. And the design and everything still looks great on both, but I do like the design of the S22 more so than the Galaxy S20. Now, we didn't have a headphone jack on the Galaxy S20, but we did have a microSD card slot, which this is the last S series to have a microSD card slot, which is very sad. The S22 is also a thick phone, it's thicker than a lot of these other phones, which is okay. Now, the back is where things start switching up. So the back of the S20 really wasn't my favorite. I feel like Samsung could have done a better job, to be honest, and that's why the S21 looked a lot better than this one, but it didn't feel much better. The standard glass back here versus the frosted glass back here, this is definitely much better feeling than this one. The triple camera setup also got cornered up, which I liked, from the S10 to this one. I think it's good in the corner, but just the way they approached it, it didn't look good. And even when you look at the Galaxy S10, the Galaxy S10 looks better than probably the S20 in my opinion. One thing about the S10 was the camera module was flat pretty much, With the S20, we pretty much had a flat camera too, but it did protrude a little bit more. But the S22 definitely protrudes a little bit more. At least it gives the illusion that it is, but it doesn't really feel like it's sticking out that much. But I definitely do love the S20. It's still supported with software and everything, just like the Galaxy S10. So these ones aren't going anywhere either. And then finally, with something like the Samsung Galaxy S21, I mean, this is a pretty good phone. I mean, this is a good phone in every single dimension. It's definitely cheaper than the Galaxy S22 right now. And Samsung did a lot of weird things with this phone. They lowered the resolution from the S20 to the S21. They put a plastic back on this phone and they removed the micro SD card slot. They should have done one thing at a time. Samsung does this thing. They do like 50 things at one time and then they give us some things back. And in this case, I guess they gave us a little bit of a better looking display, but they also gave us the frosted glass back, which was nice. So I liked having that capability back. I didn't like the frosted plastic back, but the front of these phones look almost the same. Not really that big of a difference, but the S22 feels like a thinner phone compared to the S21. You also have kind of the same type of feeling of the side, but the S21 definitely feels a little bit more thinner because it does kind of have this curve on the back a little bit. But speaking about the back, if you could tell me, they kind of look like the same thing. There's not really like that big of a difference between the two. But if you look at the camera modules, the camera is definitely much bigger on the Galaxy S22. And that's kind of good because you're definitely getting better cameras on the S22 for sure. But this frosted glass back is what kind of weirds me out. It's just, you can tell there's a difference basically. And I think the plastic is good at some point if the plastic starts getting better. But I don't know. Like you could tell there's a little bit of a difference. And definitely the heft to it. Actually, there's not even that big of a difference in the heft. But the S22 is definitely the more premium feeling one here for sure. So kind of to be honest, when you look at all these Samsung phones to one another, you may ask yourself, well, which one should you upgrade to? Well, in my opinion, the best value per dollar as of right now is probably the Galaxy S20. I think this one is probably the best value per dollar out of all these phones, mostly because it's still supported with software. The S10 is supported with software too, but we don't know. It may not last as long as the S20. This one also has a 120 Hz panel, which is going to future-proof itself a little bit more, so that's another big thing to keep in mind. The centered hole punch display gives the illusion that it's almost like any other of these Samsung phones, but I just don't like the back. I don't think it looks that beautiful, but you do have 8K capability on this, just like all the other Samsung phones nowadays, so this one is probably the best one value per dollar, but I do think if you have the money, then, go for the S22. It's the best phone out of all these probably. It's not the most impactful, but it'll give you the longest supported software, 4 years of full OS updates and 5 years of security updates. It'll give you the best camera. Some things it's lacking. It doesn't have a micro SD card slot, just like with 3 out of these 5 phones, this going onwards. You don't have, the 1440p panel like you do on this one, and this one. And you don't have, I guess the headphone jack like these two. But other than that, this is a worthwhile upgrade. I think it's a great phone with a lot of capability. But when you look at all these, I mean, from the Galaxy S10 onwards, they kind of look like the same phone. The Galaxy S9 is probably the oldest one when it comes down to it, and it doesn't really look as amazing as something like the S22, but definitely you can see how each edition kind of brought something different, and now we're at the S22, which looks like one of the smaller ones out of all these. It looks about the same size as the Galaxy S10, so I'll definitely tell you that's kind of how I feel. If you guys have any questions or anything, if you want to pick any of these phones up, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there, help support the channel at the same time. Hit the like button if you guys enjoyed the video, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.